All right, we'll continue to give people a couple of minutes to kind of stream in here, but I'll kind of do a quick little introduction. For those of you that have watched us here for the past several years, Michael Clark, Brett Waltz, and then Matt Griffin here today, going to be giving you this forecast for winter 2024-25. I think this is like the seventh winter one that I've been on, which is kind of crazy to think about. And we really haven't had any super exciting winters in the last 7 years. We'll talk about whether that will change for this upcoming year. We'll be sure to answer some questions towards the end. I know that Michael put some polls in here. I see somebody asking, yes, you will receive a copy of the recording at the end if you signed up for the webinar. We have your email. We'll be sure to send that over to you. Real quick, want to give a shout out to Farm Credit Mid-America for once again sponsoring this webinar. They've been with us for the past several webinars. Be sure to give them some love. Head over to their website. Look into them. They help a lot of folks out in the agriculture industry across parts of the Ohio Valley. With that all being said, I will get us started. And Michael, if you want to actually start out, tell people about Clarity. For those of you that are new, a little bit about what Clarity is and what it does, and we'll get into the forecast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brett, and thank you, Matt, for being here today. And yeah, Clarity is a combination of everybody on our team and our brains over the last several years of just bridging the gap between data and forecasting and weather information, making sure that there's a human element involved. And sometimes the weather data, the automated weather forecasts that we all have watch and love is not very good, regardless of where you get it from. So Clarity really puts the expert meteorologist in front of the user. So no matter what, they're always getting a great forecast. And there's nothing like it. I mean, there's every weather tool imaginable under the sun, and we add new tools to it every month. I mean, it is the most innovative, up-to-date, best platform in this industry by far. And in the winter, it's a huge, huge tool for people. Even the enthusiast, it's just a great application on so many fronts. You can do a couple things on the Pro too. You can add pavement forecasts and treatment recommendations, and you can also add the ability to talk to Matt Griffin himself here every day.
That's right.
And all of us here, we can talk to you and help you. So scan the code, sign up. We'd love to see you all join up with Clarity, and we'll talk a little bit more about Clarity and its tools as we go throughout the webinar today. But it is truly an incredible platform that we're very excited to have for you guys.
Yep, that's a great breakdown of Clarity. And as we get into this webinar, we always kind of like to start with drought conditions, where we've been, because it does matter. It matters in terms of where we could go in terms of precipitation trends. And, I have to ask, because I was out for a lot of October on paternity leave, but Matt, it didn't rain hardly at all for much of the country for October. From your experience, I would say that this is probably one of the drier months that I can remember. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. And I feel like especially this time of the year, it just seems like a naturally active period we always get into every year, these lows moving through. And it's been quiet, but things seem to be changing a little bit here over the next couple of weeks. I mean, gosh, we've got here in Indianapolis got a big rain upcoming and more rain likely in the cards heading into middle to late part of November here. So I would imagine on this drought monitor here, especially the Southern Ohio Valley, Kentucky, Tennessee valleys, probably see a lot of alleviation there, at least versus what this map shows with the forecast moving forward. But yeah, it's been dry, no doubt about it.
Awesome.
Brett, I've got some people that
Yeah.
are saying they can't see us or something. I'm not sure.
Says we aren't
Um,
able to see you, shows you at the very bottom of the screen. You can see the comment too. See perfectly on my iPad. Okay. They're saying we can see us just
okay,
fine. So
may have
let
just
me,
been that person.
yeah, it may be your settings. It might be your settings because you can change how you can see it, whether you're looking at us or just the screen. So you may want to take a look at that. But again, we will have the recording regardless, and we'll be sure to send it out to everyone.
Just came up.
Continuing on here. So Fall to date ranks, guys. This is something that we always try to look at as well. It's been one of the warmest falls on record, and not just for part of the country, for pretty much the entirety of the United States. I mean, the vast
Crazy.
majority of districts in here are top 10 warmest on record. The north central part of the country is the top 2 warmest on record. And we have more warmth that we're dealing with the next 7 days before we finally get a little bit of a change coming as we work towards the end of the month. And on the drought note, the northern plains have been very dry and very warm. And I think that's part of the reason why these drought conditions have, gotten so bad in parts of those areas and so expansive. I think winter is very important for these areas to get some snow down, to get a little bit of a snowpack, or we could have continuing problems as we go into next spring. So here's a look at the next 2 weeks. We'll kind of zoom through this and then really get into the meat of the forecast. Next 2 weeks, it's very warm over the next 7 days for, again, much of the country, especially the north central US. We do have a change that if you subscribe to Clarity, you've been watching our long-range forecast videos, we've been talking about this for a long time, leading up to Thanksgiving, likely going to get into a colder pattern, especially for the central US, but likely across the southern and eastern tier of the United States as well. Probably the coldest air of the season so far. And I think that maybe our first couple of chances of some wintry weather. I wouldn't 100% rule it out. Matt, I know you've kind of been looking at the forecast into next week. A lot of varying solutions out there, but in your opinion, something that we need to keep an eye on for maybe wintry weather chances?
Well, I mean, there's something there for sure. You take a look at the ensembles, and there's a signal there for some snow, but we're dealing with an upper level low. And anytime we say upper level low, it's going to mean model chaos, and that will likely continue over the next couple days. So something we'll fine tune as we get closer. But gosh, it's a bit of a modeling chaos out there. And Brett, to allude to your point, the coldest temperatures of the season, and gosh, it doesn't take much to be the coldest air of the season with how warm we've been. I mean, gosh, first kind of real cold shot we've had. So times are changing though, and I'm all for it. So.
For sure. And I think that these two maps right here just highlight how much more active that it's been and it's going to be compared to where we were throughout the vast majority of last month, which was probably the driest October on record for the United States as a whole. A lot of precipitation in here for the central part of the country into the Ohio Valley. That looks to stay pretty consistent over the next 2 weeks. In fact, a massive area of what we call an upper level low possible next week. Which will help stream in some of this colder air as well. But I don't want to forget about this, and this is insane to me. I personally can't remember a storm tracking towards Florida this late in the season. Maybe it's happened before, but I can't think of one, at least in recent memory, that this is the end of November, and both the GEFS and the EPS models are pretty excited about some kind of a tropical system or a hurricane more likely working towards Florida as we work towards the middle to latter part of next week. This area has just been completely, attacked, I would say, with these storms over the past several years.
That's a hell of a signal at this distance. I mean, some of those shown up in red, trying to signify of even a stronger area of low pressure, a stronger hurricane there. So pretty wild thing to see at this distance on the ensembles here. And pretty similar between the American and European ensembles.
Yep, I absolutely. And I think it's worth noting, in my opinion, that where this is coming from, the overall upper level pattern, 500 millibar pattern, signals to me a higher than average confidence situation for a landfall on the west coast of Florida. Just looking at the upper level pattern, I mean, and the overwhelming ensemble support at this distance for landfall there and somewhere in Southwest Florida is, I would be concerned for those folks right now at this distance.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that's just an area that's just been hit over and over and over the past 2 or 3 years. And so certainly one that I think a lot of people are going to be monitoring carefully. And I'm sure that I know our team already monitoring in the Clarity platform. Real quick, let's talk about the end of November into early December. We talked about the cold signal in the week 2 time frame. That will likely linger into the start of this time frame through the end of November. but I think there are already some signals that the warmth is going to come back. In fact, I'm already kind of seeing the North Pacific on some of the extended range data trend back to where we were earlier in the month, which would be a concern that the warmth is going to come back. And there's a lot of support for December, once again, trending in a warmer direction. I don't think the whole month is completely warm, though. There are some interesting signals later in December that I think could open the door for some colder air towards the holidays. But I do think that for a time through the middle part of the month, we get back into this warmer pattern. So we were warm, we're getting cold for a time, trending back warmer, especially the first or second week of the month of December, but still active. And yeah, you can still get some snow in there, perhaps even with warmer than normal temperatures, depending on how strong the storm systems are.
Yeah, and I would say, Brett, one thing that has my attention, at least something I would like to watch is a later in the month MJO pulse in December.
Yeah.
There are some indications of that. Now, there's no denying that 4, 5, and 6 are very, very warm MJO phases for December. So it's like you said, mid-December is probably pretty warm. It may even be, exceptionally warm for most people. But I am very, very interested in terms of what I'm seeing just with the North Pacific pattern and the potential. If we do get into 6, 7, and 8 late December, it may set up we've got it. My point to this is we have a negative EPO coming here in about 7 days. It's a pretty decent one. As a result of the current tropical forcing cycle, if that cycle can repeat, my thing is maybe this is a reoccurring pattern here a month from now or so, a month and a half, that may lead to the, like you said, a colder end of the month, perhaps. So not all hope is lost for those who love cold and
yeah, and I definitely think it's towards the holidays. I think it's later in the month. You go back a couple of years, I think 2016 did something similar where it kind of got cold. 2022 was warm for a while and it got cold at the end of the month. So did 2020. And so there is some precedent for it. Really, it's been every 2 years or so lately. 2022 was colder, 2020 was colder. I wouldn't be shocked, as you mentioned, if this area here got colder towards the holidays, but I think that this area is probably pretty warm leading up to it. And so I think in terms of snow potential, it's going to be one of those things that you're going to have to cash in when you get the opportunities, which we haven't done the past couple of years.
Yep.
Brett, it gets cold during the winter though, right?
Well, it does, but here's that wintry stretch we were talking about. We already kind of touched on this at the end of November. The upper level pattern isn't terribly unfavorable for perhaps some snow chances in the eastern Ohio Valley and the interior northeast U.S., along with the northern plains. But I do want to note, end of November, your above normal snow would be at 1/2 inch to 1 inch. It doesn't take much to be above normal for snowfall. I do think that there is some potential in there. In fact, some of the data already trying to pick up on that late next week that we'll need to keep an eye on. With all that being said, let's get into the fun stuff. Let's get into the actual winter forecast, and where we always start if you watch these webinars is ENSO. And last year we were in a strong El Nino, which heavily drove the pattern. This year's a little bit different. We're borderline weak La Nina, but we haven't gotten there yet. I would call it a cool neutral state, which we have not had since 2013-14 when there was a stretch of them, 2012-13, 2013-14. And so it's been a while since we've had just a cool neutral non-La Nina or El Nino winter. So very curious to see how this evolves. I think overall the estimate is a cool central-based event, or maybe a weak central-based La Nina. You can kind of see the coldest waters in this Nino 3.4 region and not near the coast of South America right now. Typically speaking, when the coldest waters are near South America, tends to be colder. When they're closer to the dateline or this Nino 3.4 region, winters tend to be a little bit warmer. We're heading more towards the warmer version of those as things stand right now. I'll also note, and I know, Michael, we were kind of talking about this earlier in the week, there aren't a whole lot of years that are super similar in terms of our current progression from a strong El Nino to a cool neutral or weak La Nina. The only 2 years really are 1992 and 2016, and those winters were different. HDDs in both of them were warmer than normal, but 1992 had a lot more cold air blasts than 16-17, which was a pretty warm winter as a whole.
Yeah, it's in these particular situations, there's a couple more factors at play, which I know you're going to talk about, but it's the North Pacific Ocean, I think, is really the big thing to watch here. And the wild card, the ENSO may have been the same in those 2 years, but the North Pacific pattern was totally different, and which is why we got those different outcomes, which I know you have a good slide on that coming up. So
yeah, if we were just, and that's a great point, because you can get varying outcomes because the forcing isn't that strong. If you were just to take this, you would look at, okay, this is not a bad winter. Snowier, it's colder to the north, warmer on the East Coast, typical of La Niñas, but not all that bad. But as Michael alluded to, when it is so weak, other factors will drive the pattern. And in my opinion, and I know that you all both agree, it's the North Pacific Ocean that is going to ultimately likely drive the pattern. In fact, this is what we call the PDO. It's the Pacific Decadal Oscillation Index. It basically is measuring these warm ocean waters here and the cooler waters near Alaska and kind of along the west coast of North America. So typically a negative PDO is warm water here and cooler waters to the north and to the east. In fact, the latest value was the lowest on record for any month dating back to 1854, which is just complete insanity. We have been in this very strong negative PDO state for several years now, and we've peaked. I would imagine that it's not going to drop any lower than this. It would be impossible or nearly impossible to do that. We're the most negative of all time, and I think that is a big driver for this winter. You look at other years that were incredibly strong with the negative PDO, then you start building more of that eastern U.S. warmth in and a very active pattern as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Brett, one thing I was just saying is that previous map there you had on the ocean temperature profile, we've done a lot of comparisons to the 500 millibar height pattern in the Pacific. And it's been very focused on the ridging being a little south of the Bering Sea, the chain of the islands there in Alaska. Exactly. And low pressure centers going up and across the top, big storms, which is responsible for all the cooler water that you're seeing there. It's the upwelling of the cooler ocean waters. And in order to change this, guys, that wave pattern needs to shift north and east. Okay. We need to see the high where the low is to develop the low where the high is. So we need to see that take place, that change. Now, what's interesting, again, as I was talking about a little bit ago, and I'm looking at the 500 charts, there's a really, really nice Alaskan Ridge in the 11 to 15 day forecast right now. Will it verify? That's another question for another day. I mean, these long extended Alaskan Ridge forecasts have been known to be poor at this distance, especially this time of year, the last several years. But that's the wild card, and I know we've got a wild card slide. That's what we need to watch, because that could change the whole outcome of the winter and mute every other signal we're even talking about. But it could also magnify everything we're saying and really drive home the warm winter if that ridge never develops.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we've kind of dealt with this problem the past several years because I think we've been in this strong negative PDO the past several years. Model data has tried to build the ridge in in the North Pacific, only to fail time and time again. And I definitely think that's a concern that it could happen again this year. Can we get some interludes? I think that's possible. We're seeing it right now, but can it actually happen consistently? And I think that's the wild card that you mentioned. If you were just to take the Pacific Ocean, it's a warm winter east and one that is not very snowy, maybe better for the far northern plains, which would be good for those drought conditions. I think if you combine the two, it actually gets even worse, if you can believe it. If you look at the cool neutral plus weak La Nina years, or with a strong negative PDO, you get years like 2012, 2013. You get years like 2011, 2012, which were very warm winters. 16, 17 is one that's in there. And so it's a very warm signal overall, especially for the eastern U.S. And again, keeps that storm track well to the north and is a miserable winter, to be completely honest, for Ohio and points off to the east.
Nothing like December rain, Brett.
Yeah, yeah. I will note, and this is something interesting and perhaps goes to Michael's wild card point as well. If you just take Tropical Tidbits has a really nice tool that looks at the top correlating ocean years or years to the ocean temperatures. These are actually a little bit colder. Years like 2007, years like 2013 are in there. And so these are a little bit colder. And so there's your little bit of hope that if you just look at the entire globe itself and not just the North Pacific, it's a little bit colder, but I would argue the North Pacific is more important because it's more directly impactful to our weather patterns. So something to keep in mind. Things like the Indian Ocean, things like the Atlantic Ocean do have an impact, but not as big normally as the Pacific Ocean. Another factor, and Matt and I talked a little bit about this before this webinar. This is a warm signal, positive QBO. If you're not familiar with the QBO, it's stratospheric winds. It impacts our polar vortex. And solar activity, high solar activity also has a little bit of an impact. Again, it's not the be-all, end-all. But if you look at these years and factor in our La Nina or weak, cool, neutral state as well, these are warm. But I don't think that this shows all that meets the eye because there is some variability in these years. And I think that this could be something to keep an eye on. We're going to talk about this later after the outlook. This is something that is very interesting to me that, again, I think there's more to it than meets the eye in terms of the polar vortex. I saw Charles say you guys are a buzzkill. Sorry, I'm sorry. Look, I would love nothing more. These guys can say it, and I know, Michael, you agree. I'd love nothing more than to forecast a cold and a snowy winter. But that's not my job.
No, and that's the thing, guys, is it's just trying to take a level-headed, non-biased approach to this. It's difficult to do because as a meteorologist, as someone's predicting the future, it's our natural human instinct to have a confirmation bias of wanting, the forecast to be what we personally want to happen. And that's a slippery slope. So we really try to, to keep it real. Now, I'll tell you, when we get to the wild card slide, I've got a decent rant that I want to go on and give you guys some talks here. So
I'm excited.
Stay tuned.
I'm excited. Guys, so here are overall analogs. We combined all of that stuff. We look at the overall analogs, 22, 23, 20, 21, some recent years in there, 16, 17, 12, 13, 08, 09. That's probably the one cold winter in here. And 01, 02. Overall, they're warm. It's a warm winter, especially to the east. Maybe not so bad for the western part of the country, the western plains. Decent little storm track up in the northern plains, which again, I think is very, very important with those drought conditions to the north, that those areas get snow. This is a good signal for the northern plains. Not as good if you want snow across the central plains in the Ohio Valley. Model data agrees. Very warm. All of these here, European model, the Canadian, the CFS, the NMME, which is kind of a blend of some different outcomes. All of them are very warm, different variations of warm. And overall, pretty active, I would say, across the Ohio Valley. It just may not come in the form of snow based off of what these forecasts are. So overall, actually some agreement this year in terms of model data and top analogs. You go month by month. January on these is the warmest year. I will say there's some variability in the Great Lakes. A couple of these years had some shots of cold in the Great Lakes to start out the new year. So that'll be something to watch. But aside from that, January, very warm. February, warm as well. December, the least warm, which I think goes to kind of what we talked about earlier. Maybe towards the holidays, there could be some shots of cold air, but still not cold, warmer than normal for the eastern part of the country. Overall, pretty consistent signal for a colder west and a warmer east as we go throughout this winter. You all have any notes to add to this?
No, I think, Brett, the one thing that I would, again, once we get to the wild card slide, is I want to preface that the models, all the seasonal models for one, have a seasonal warm bias prediction.
Sure.
They all are always warm. Okay. And for there to be any hint of cold on them is already a stretch. Um, and I want to point out to people that in some of our most intense winters since 2000, um, most of the time the seasonal forecast models just don't see that. Even if, let's say, we get this, there's a 25% chance of a harsh winter, you know, the models just they don't see it, the extremes, for whatever reason. They don't have the ability to do that well on. So just so you all know, um, it's not a guarantee just because there's a consensus with these seasonal models.
And I think that's why it's important to have clarity, because we are going to update, our long range thinking daily on the Clarity platform, and you can get that with the Pro or the starter version. So, scan the QR code, sign up. A lot of winter metrics as well, I know, as Michael kind of discussed earlier, but long range is something that we look at every day, because it matters, especially for organizations that are trying to decide how many resources to stockpile, how much salt do we need to have, what does staffing look like, and so short and long term winter weather is very important, and we really prioritize that in the Clarity platform.
Brett, will you launch that poll we had real quick? We're going to pause here for station identification. You're watching the BAMWX winter webinar. No, in all seriousness, we don't. We try to keep these complete full value add. We spend a lot of time and effort and energy on these, and we always like to ask our panelists questions. If you're considering joining BAM, if you're considering signing up and utilizing our services, I can tell you there's nothing more fun than some of these long range videos and these updated outlooks that start to pinpoint some pretty fun periods in winter. And then for those of you that are in the thick of it, and the slightest bit of snow, ice, sleet, freezing rain, whatever throws off your entire operation, Clarity is just, it's awesome for that. And the tools that we have in it are absolutely fantastic. So I'm curious, who's going to sign up, who's interested. Just vote on the poll. We appreciate your participation, and with that, we'll get right back to you, Brett. We've got a lot of really nice comments coming in, by the way. Bill, Thomas, Andrew, William, you guys are all really, really nice. I really appreciate the kind words there. Derek, thank you. Derek's been with us a long time. So awesome guys. Really appreciate that.
So yeah, here's the breakdown month by month. Again, December here on the left, active. I think that is something that is going to continue to be something that rolls over from November and into December. Mild overall, averaging out, but not completely torched for December. If you're just above normal, you can still have some cold shots in there. I think that it's going to be something that happens as we work towards the holidays. January, again, most widespread in terms of the warmth. I did note a cooler Great Lakes risk in there. That was something that I saw in a couple of the years. I think the risk is the core of the warmth would be a little bit further north and west, slightly cooler in the Great Lakes, some blocking signals on a couple of the analogs, but so I did mention that. And then February, overall a pretty warm signal as well. I could see February, though, with that setup being one that could favor some snowstorms across parts of the central U.S., maybe the western Ohio Valley. We did have that in February of 2021 with that big cold blast that happened in Texas. It wouldn't completely shock me if there were some cold shots in the central United States as we go into February. Here's how things average out. I did want to note, for those of you interested in heating demand, our current forecast would be the 9th warmest on record, which would be, I think, just above 2022, 2023 as a comparison year. And so again, kind of around a couple of recent years in recent memory, not as warm as last year. It's going to be hard to be as warm as last year. It was insanely warm. It was over 200 points below the 10-year and 300 points below the 30-year normal. Regardless, well below normal with heating demand for this upcoming winter. And I do think that we get some much needed moisture across the central part of the country in the Ohio Valley throughout this winter. Again, I think that's very important to monitor as we head into spring. Speaking of that, March, our shoulder season forecast, cooler, especially for the north central part of the country. I think we saw a lot of years that were very active. Again, the year that I just want to, or the area that I just want to continue to monitor, if that snow track does not pan out up here, I am concerned about lingering drought conditions and that this could be an area that could trend drier. And so something to monitor if the drought does not improve over the next couple of months. Continuing to move along here, guys. Here's the wild card slide. And this, to me, I think always the polar vortex is a wild card, but I think it's even more so this year. The positive QBO and high solar years we talked about earlier, while they average out warmer than normal, there does tend to be disruptions of the polar vortex in these years. Not breakdowns, not complete warming events, but stretching, displacement. 22, 23 saw it, but it sent the colder air towards Asia and Greenland. 16, 17 had it as well. You can see it getting hit on both sides near Greenland and Asia, but it sent the cold air near Alaska, which is why it was such an insanely warm February of that year. 13, 14 also hit it, but look what it did. It stretched it and sent it over the US and over North America. And it's why it got so cold that winter. And so all of this is here to say that where the vortex ends up going will have a big impact on this winter. There's an above normal chance that it could displace or stretch. Where does that happen? There's just no way to know. And so in my opinion, along with kind of what Michael mentioned in the North Pacific, that is the biggest wild card of this winter, the biggest uncertainty, if you will.
Yeah, and Brett, I'd like to add a few things here to this is, these types of outcomes, knowing where the polar vortex is going to go and what it's going to do, I don't believe that we will ever actually be able to know that. I don't know that we'll be able to ever actually forecast accurately where that's going to go and how that's going to impact us over in the overall winter season. So when we say these are wild cards, I mean that's what they are. They're wild cards. There's no way to to accurately pinpoint exactly where they're going to go. And so you have to, for people that need a seasonal forecast and that need this type of information that far out, you've got to really make sure that you're being realistic with this and make sure that you're being make sure that you're being that you understand that this could go any direction if the vortex goes one way or the other. And it can change the entire scope of the forecast for winter. So it's just important to understand that we can make a lot of predictions and presumptions here, but if a ridge pops up in the North Pacific and stretches the vortex out, it's a different ballgame, and there's a chance for that.
Yep. Great points for sure. Polar vortex is always one that is very challenging to know what it's going to do ahead of time. You can get a general idea. It's going to stretch. It's going to displace. It's going to be weaker. It's going to be stronger. But it all depends on where it ends up setting up shop. So real quick, guys, I'm going to kind of stream over this here for a second. City snowfall outlooks. A lot of brown on this. There was a lot of brown last year, meaning that most of these cities are below normal with snowfall. But you can also see out here to the right, a little bit snowier than last year. So it's kind of crazy that there's so much below normal on this chart, and yet it's still a little bit snowier than last year, which just goes to show how unsnowy, I don't think that's a word, but I'm going to use it. I just made it up. How unsnowy that it was this past year. Minneapolis, the only city we're forecasting here to be above normal of note. So pretty crazy again. Will be another year as things stand right now with not a ton of snow. And we reflected this for those of you in Indy. Did want to give you all some love. We're based out of Indy, so we always do a little competition to see which meteorologist can get the closest to Indy season snow. Tyler won last year, and if you're a snow lover, you'll be sad to see that he forecasted the least amount of snow this year at 8 inches. But Matt, 15 inches. What you forecasted the most? Why? What are you seeing?
I've got the highest, and that's still well below normal, but my gut says we get one big one. That's all it takes. Something like a February 21, where we got around 10 inches with that system. That's all it takes. I think we can get one big, good system, call it sometime in mid to late January, February. I think we can get one. So going aggressive, and we'll see how it plays out.
Now,
I like it.
hey, and I will say too, to Matt's point, again, with what I just talked about, I see people on here mentioning 13, 14. Obviously, we put it there as a wild card and all that, this, that, and the other. And listen, by no means am I saying it is a 13, 14. I don't want people to think that. But I will tell you, the idea going into the 13, 14 winter was very similar to this one. There was not a big, obvious signal. The ridge just developed in mid-December and it never left. It just never left. So that could very well, be one of those things that happens, and Matt could be low. But
Well, yeah, we'll see. I
We'll see.
forecasted the most last year, and it did not work out for me. So apologies. I was aggressive. I was excited last year, and it didn't happen. So gonna be a little bit more conservative this year. We will see. I hope
But
I am wrong.
before we get into South America, though,
Yeah.
one thing we didn't really touch on as well is, and you and I kind of talked about it before, Brett, the Great Lakes are so warm right now too.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Anytime we get a cold shot, some of these brief instances of cold shots, I would be looking for the lake effect machine to ramp up. There'll probably be some significant lake effect snow events this year with how record warm the Great Lakes are. So we just need those cold air intrusions. And when those come by, it's not going to be obviously everywhere. If you're just downwind of the lake, doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get a big lake effect snow, but probably much of a guarantee somewhere somebody is going to get one of those big ones that sets up somewhere this season. So just another thing to look out for the lake effect machine to really ramp up this year. So
Yeah, and you can see it in the chart that while these years are still below normal, they're a little bit snowier, certainly than they were last year. And Milwaukee and Chicago not nearly as much below normal. In fact, Milwaukee about normal. And so I think some of that can be probably attributed to the lake effect risk that you mentioned.
right.
So Matt is the South America expert. I know that we probably have some folks in the agriculture industry that are watching, and always try to give South America some love. So Matt, I'm going to let you take it away. You always have great content with South America Forecast.
Perfect. Yeah. So the ultimately trying to develop these analogs, I tried my best to find the best oceanic fit, and oftentimes for North America we're looking at the ENSO region, or Michael even talked about the PDO, those warmer ocean waters in the Pacific. A little bit different, obviously. We're in the southern hemisphere here, and trying to find previous years that really match the layout of the oceans here across the continent. And a bit of an unusual setup, how cooler the waters are in general off the west coast, and we're a little bit warmer off the east coast. But that bottom left image there, that plus AMM, the Atlantic Meridional mode, very positive right now. And I think that'll be a big factor here. And you can see what those correlations, that arrow to the right of that, does help bring in some moisture into areas like Mato Grosso and Goiás and some of those major production regions of Brazil here. And you can see it's a little bit drier into Argentina, southern Brazil, into Uruguay here. There's a little bit of I think that can counteract a little bit of the more widespread dryness that La Nina, that kind of top left image, represents there. But you can even see, even in those La Nina correlations, the purples and the blues signifying wetter than normal conditions, December through February. There's a theme here, whether you're looking at the negative AAM, the negative IOD here. It favors rains that can get into Mato Grosso, to Goiás here, further east into some of the major coffee regions. You can see across some of these pattern drivers here, there are some signals there for those Brazilian regions. Now, there's more variability into an Argentina, into a southern Brazil here. But make no mistake about it, we've been coming from record drought conditions. It's been very dry across really a lot of the continent here. Things are changing. The rains are returning, especially in those areas like in Mato Grosso, into Goiás, those major production regions into Brazil. And I think that can continue to be the theme here. South America is, I would say, from a distance, a general forecasting perspective, it's a little bit less complicated than North America. You've got a little bit less, mountains and various different features to work out here. It's a little bit more stable because a lot of the Southern Hemisphere is mostly water here. And that makes, I think, the models have a little bit better of an idea of how to handle that here. Regardless, and you can see some of those analog years that I've kind of brought together here based off of some of those patterns I just mentioned in the overall oceanic layout here. Look where those blues show up here. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but that's areas like Mato Grosso and Dagoias here, and then off into some of the major coffee regions. And then it's dry further to the south, southern Brazil and northeastern Argentina in particular. Now, where the analogs aren't necessarily clear cut would be some of the major production regions into Argentina. That'd be kind of the Buenos Aires of the world, the Cordobas, La Pampas, where you can see it's not as the greens and yellows aren't as vibrant there, right? And there is some variability in not only the analogs, but in the data of how dry some of those major production regions in Argentina can be here. The data itself at this distance is trying to allude to the same thing, especially the top left, the bottom left, and the bottom right images. They're all pretty darn close. They may vary a little bit north and south with their rainfall orientation and placement, but they're really kind of suggesting this wet and then underneath the area of the better moisture, dry conditions that can develop here. Personally, that matches the analogs the best would be that CANSIPS model in the top left-hand side. And ultimately, Brett, if you go to the next slide here, you can see the CANSIPS and the analogs allude to this outlook here. And I think for Mato Grosso into Goiás, east and in the major coffee regions, I think we're dealing with above normal rainfall. If you are following the situation closely, really over the past 2 to 3 weeks, the rains have been returning there in a big way. Sometimes you can get stuck in these patterns, especially into South America. And I think this year, that's where the rains will set up shop. We're already kind of seeing that. That's happened recently, in the forecast over the next couple of weeks should be wetter there in general. And I think we're drier to southern Brazil and northeastern Argentina. Again, areas like Cordoba, La Pampa, Buenos Aires, a little bit more of a question mark there. For now, I've got equal chances. You can consider that near normal moisture. I don't think it's overly significant drier or wetter one way or the other, or warmer or cooler for that matter. But if I had to lean one way to the forecast for those areas into southern Argentina, I would lean a little bit drier into the forecast. That's where my gut would lean as far as a risk is concerned. The other risk to this is what some of the data I showed previously alluded to is maybe the rains set up a little bit further south than what I think. Maybe the rain set up closer to Mato Grosso, perhaps into Sao Paulo and some of those areas there. So some north-south variability here, but I'm going with the general La Nina, with the oceanic analogs, and what some of the data is suggesting as well. So right now, this is kind of the final outlook for December, January, and February upcoming here. And overall, this probably bodes pretty well for output in South America. There's a lot of production there in Mato Grosso. Into Goiás is probably the richest area, I would say, in South America as far as output is concerned. And considering we're above normal, that bodes well. And they need a lot of rain. The soils there just can't take a whole lot. So they really need the rains to keep up with things here. So I would say overall, this isn't the worst outlook for output into South America. Of course, things can degrade a little bit if things end up a little bit more drier than what I think into like a Cordoba, Buenos Aires, and La Pampa into Argentina, where there's a lot of production there as well. But there's a lot of production in northeastern Argentina as well that I think that will struggle a little bit this year, which is a very La Nina-like response here. So that's kind of my latest take on how South America plays out this upcoming year.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, South America, a big deal in terms of the markets. And I know La Nina years always get a lot of attention down there, especially some of the droughts that happened, not last year, but the previous years related to it. So certainly will be something that we keep a very close eye on. Guys, real quick, and then we'll kind of start to wrap things up. Wanted to talk about this, and Michael, I'll probably let you chat a little bit about this because this is just the coolest tool that I think we've ever added to Clarity if you're in the snow removal industry. And by the way, I did put another poll in there if you haven't voted on it yet, but our new treatment recommendations. This is such a cool thing that we added.
Yeah, so we got together and put our heads together and our experiences and talked about what weather conditions would cause people to need to treat or plow. And we came up with the variables necessary, the forecast variables, and we combined it with Pavecast, and now we're providing you with recommendations on getting out, monitoring your lots, and putting down treatment, making sure slick spots don't develop, and making sure that you don't have issues with your lots. So there's a number of things that can go into this. You can have a warmer pavement temperature, but a very heavy snowfall rate, and temperatures may decrease. This is a great example. If you look at the forecast here, I want you to see the last couple of hours. The pavement temperatures are in the mid to upper 40s, but it's snowing at a good clip of about 0.2 of an inch of snow per hour in the forecast above. But you see what happens, it's calling for melted snow, but likely needing to put chemical down. The reason for that is watch the pavement temperature at the end of the forecast goes down below freezing. The idea is if you get that chemical down early and it freezes, you've got the chemical down to prevent freezing. You've got chemical down to prevent the slick spots because it told you to do it, right? So it's neat. And the best thing about it is you can change the pavement types. If it's a bridge deck, if it's a concrete road, an asphalt road, whatever the case may be, and you can talk to a meteorologist. That's the best thing about this. Hey guys, I see it says this. What's your expert opinion on it? So guys, this is cool. Yeah, a lot of time, effort, energy into this, and I'm very excited to roll it out this winter season.
Yeah,
Obviously, we're very biased, but I can't imagine being in snow removal and not having this. Not
I know,
having
that's
our
how I feel,
application.
dude.
Like
Yeah.
you'd be using 5, 10 different apps, and one app says this, one app says that. I don't know what the heck you would do. I mean,
Yep.
seriously. I mean,
Yep.
it'd be a lot of stress, unneeded
Yeah.
stress, really.
Yeah. Justin
So,
asks if we're using pavement sensors or just modeling. We're working on both. We're ingesting RWIS data and ingesting it into the forecast. And we're doing a lot of bias correction to the pavement modeling right now and trying to make it as good as we can. It's a constant evolution of improvement. But we are taking the pavement forecast and the treatment recommendations very, very seriously right now and trying to make them the best they can be. So I appreciate the question, Justin.
yeah.
Is snow removal a
Chris,
tool app based only with online version of Clarity? No, it's in the app too.
app and online. Yeah.
if you
App
don't
and
see it in
online,
your
yeah.
app, you need to update your app.
Or
That'll
pay
fix
for it.
Or
You've
pay
got to
for it.
make sure you have the Pavecast option. Yeah.
Or that too. Yeah.
For those of you that sign up, if you sign up today for the 750, you've got to go and you've got to add on Pavecast for 1500. So just make sure you understand that it won't show up. Someone's asking, where is this located on the website? Again, there you go. Thank you. That's where you can go sign up and then download the application, and it'll be on the winter focus screen of the app. So look at that. Wayne Bowles coming in with the
Love
hot
Wayne.
recommendation, telling him to people to call him. That's incredible. Thank you,
We
Wayne.
love Wayne. We love
He's
Wayne.
awesome.
He's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So
All
Brett,
right.
is this it for the day?
Yeah, a couple other tools here. Observe snowfall data, future snowfall data is on there. Of course, we talked about consulting with a meteorologist, and so just a couple of things that you can get with the Clarity platform in terms of winter. Of course, we have other tools, agriculture. I see a lot of people, 28% of the people that answered in the agriculture industry. So we've got all kinds of industry specific metrics for agriculture, lightning options, wet bulb globe temperatures, alerts. All of that again on Clarity. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the chat to sign up today. And that's it. That is what we have. Clarity is a lot of what we've been talking about, but we do have API data and preparedness services as well. And again, I want to be sure to give a big shout out to Farm Credit Mid-America FCMA. Again, you can see kind of where they help areas, Arkansas, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Ohio, and Tennessee, to help them with financial services and credit for rural parts of America. So really, really appreciate them being on board. Again, they are great partners of ours, and love having them on for every webinar.
Yep. Great stuff, Brett. Excellent job putting this together. Matt, excellent job with South America and the outlooks. You guys killed it. For all of you watching, we appreciate the support and joining, and we ask that you share it with a friend and sign up if you haven't. And best of luck to you this season.